So we've looked at the switch functionality inside music segment containers, but of course we also have a higher level of switch functionality. We don't have switch functionality directly within music playlist containers, but we can actually place music playlist containers inside of switch containers. So let's select our tension switch version and explore. We'll hit shift, and now you will see that we have a new parent music switch container option. So we'll select that. And this will be our top level music container. We're going to want to connect this to the switch as always. So let's start by going over to Game Syncs and we'll create a new switch. And in the switch, we'll create one for tension and explore. Head back over to our music switch container, and you'll see that this looks a lot more like what we have available to us in the dynamic dialogue system than a normal sound effect switch container. We can actually create multiple paths here. We can connect multiple states and multiple switches, just as we did in dynamic dialogue. So let's start by selecting the game state. And now we have obviously explore and tension. We can create a path for explore and another path for tension. And inside here, we can click and drag our music playlist containers into their respective paths. And when we go back over to the switch container, you'll see that we have that transition set up right away. So once again, let's change this from exit cue to next beat or next bar, whatever you prefer. We'll add a crossfade again. And now for starters, let's just give it a listen. We'll unpin that tension switch, select the music switch container and pin it. And let's start in Explore. So that didn't sound very good, did it? That's because we have some additional functionality that we need to set up. Let's go back over here and you'll see the sync to option. Right now it's synced to entry queue, and that means that no matter where you are in that first piece of music, as soon as you switch over, it's starting from the beginning. So let's change this to same time as playing segment, because these music pieces have the same beats per minute, they have the same key, and so we can switch in the middle of a piece of music into the other piece of music. This will sound much more seamless. So let's give this a listen now. We'll head back over to Explore. That's a little bit better. So it's really quite straightforward how you can move between these. And as we looked at in the dynamic dialogue, we can create multiple paths. So if we wanted to create additional switch groups or even additional states that would affect what type of music is playing, we could set up all of that functionality here. We could, in fact, even select spotted and create paths for that. And instead of having our switches happening within the music segment containers, have it happening in playlist containers on a higher level. And if we did that, we would want to have an explore path as we do, and then a tension path. But then of course the tension path would in fact be tension no and tension yes, and we would have these extra paths. But we're not going to do that here. I just want you to see that we have that option available to us. So we can just remove this, and that's how the music switch container works. But we can actually add a little bit more into this, and that is a stinger that will bring us from that explore music over into that tension music. So this is just an accent point that really emphasizes that something has happened, that something has changed. And unlike a regular sound effect event, which could just trigger at any particular moment, a stinger is something that we can set up to trigger on the beat. So that becomes really useful musically. So with that music switch container selected, let's take a look again at our transitions tab over here, and you'll see that we have the option transition segment, use transition segment. So we can check this, and then we can select a segment which will play when we do our transition. We need to create a new transition for this. We need to add a custom transition. And in this case, let's say we want the stinger to move from explore to tension, but not when we're coming back from tension to explore. We just want to emphasize when enemies are near, not when they go away. And so now we can use transition segment, but we don't have any kind of segment that we can use for this right now. So let's bring in that stinger I told you to ignore earlier, which is the tension spotted cymbal stinger. And we'll bring that in and we'll just put it at the top level as a music segment. And let's take a look at this now. This stinger is meant to trigger on the beat, but otherwise ignore the beat. So actually what we want is this exit cue to live in the same place as the entry cue, because everything that's going to be playing thereafter is just post-exit. Don't forget to change your tempo. And it doesn't really matter that it doesn't line up over here, because this is just going to trigger and then we can forget about it. So we'll head back over to our switch container, to the transitions tab, select that transition, and now click and drag this segment into the transition segment box over here. So now this will play anytime we're moving from explore to tension, but not back again. Let's try it out. It didn't quite work the way we wanted to, and that is because we created this new transition from explore to tension in order to play that cymbal, and it's gone back to a default of exit cue. So we need to change this again to next bar or next beat. Let's go with next beat because that cymbal will help us transition very smoothly. We'll create our fade in and fade out once again. And we'll also need to make sure that we're syncing to same time as playing segment again. So let's give it a listen now. We'll start at explore. So we actually have a problem here. That did not sync up at all, and I suspect I know what the culprit is. Head back up to our music switch container's general settings, and sure enough, our tempo, we forgot to change it. So as you can see, this is a really easy problem to encounter, and when something is just not playing the way that you expect it to or designed it to, that may well be your issue. So we fixed it. Let's try again. Start from explore. Okay, so I played that a few times because I wanted to show you something. That last transition, we didn't really hear the cymbal. We kind of heard the tail end of it. And I want to explain why that is. It is in fact because we have this fade in over here. And this fade in is affecting our transition segment as well. So we actually need to uncheck that to make sure that we always hear the cymbal, because it's going to cut that very beginning crash of the cymbal if we trigger that transition at just the wrong moment. So let's try it again now. So even when the transition is right on that downbeat, we still get to hear the cymbal. And that is essentially what we can do with a music switch container. As I showed you before, there's a lot of different functionality that you have here. You can really start stacking states and switches and getting some really dynamic path systems for how you want your music to be triggering and changing in game. Our custom transitions allow us to really fine-tune how we want to be moving between different subsections of music, and transition segments can help smooth transitions between pieces of music that may not even have the same BPM.